Thanks for listening to the Women Emerging podcast. Every week we put up a new episode with insights into leadership, practical leadership, seen through the eyes of women leaders of all ages and all sectors from right across the world. Our aim is for women to be able to say, if that's leadership, I'm in. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and join Women Emerging on our website, womenemerging.org. That's womenemerging.org for more fabulous free leadership content. Welcome. Julia Middleton, Women Emerging Director and your podcast host. For weeks now, we've been speaking to women about leading and about what they've learnt about leading and asking them to illustrate each of the learnings with an object. This episode is interrupting the series. Why? Because of events. Because of events in Armenia, a country that I feel close to. Because of friendships. And because of an admiration for a country that has been battered by wars, geopolitics, and genocide. In the last few weeks, the situation has been getting infinitely worse in Nagorno-Karabakh. And yesterday, one of my dearest of friends, Arpen Ghahriyan, was arrested as he left Karabakh for Armenia. And he was thrown into a prison in Azerbaijan. Why? Because he did what we all talk about doing. He stood up as a leader. He went to his people. He led them. He lived amongst them as they suffered. And the more he led, the more he became a target. Arpen is an enormous big bear of a man. He has the kindest of eyes. And he also has one of the most beautiful of wives, Veronica, who is also one of my dearest friends. But this podcast is about leading and about women leading. So I decided this week to interview a young woman called Arpen who works in a school in Armenian and whose family is in Karabakh and have been there for 7 generations. I'm going to talk to her about courage, about how you lead and you continue to lead, and how you continue with your day job when you're terrified for your family and for your country, and when you feel the weight of Armenian history on your shoulders, and also when you have this ominous feeling that history might be about to repeat itself. As we record, I hope that someday soon, Arpen, you'll be able to listen to this episode and be proud of Arpen. So first I'm going to talk to Arpen about the context of Armenia and the context of her family and in a way why her fear is so deep. And then we'll talk about how you lead with courage, how you combine, because this thread of combining has become so interesting to us all, how you can combine as a leader vulnerability and strength. Because I suppose as you get more frightened, there's a danger that you close off, you close yourself off as a leader. As you get more frightened, as you get really vulnerable, you close yourself off, when as a leader possibly you need to open yourself up. But having said that, not open yourself up too much. But let me let Arpen talk you through this, because her words are much more powerful than mine. Arpen, I really want to eventually talk to you about how do you lead when you're frightened, when courage is called for, and how do you combine showing vulnerability but also showing strength, and how do you do both? And so there is so much we want to talk about. But before we get there, let's talk about, to some extent, why you are so frightened at the moment. What is happening in Armenia? What is happening in Nagorno-Karabakh? And what is happening to your family? Tell us.
Julia, right now, my country and my people are going through tragedy, a disaster, because Armenians living in Nagorno-Karabakh, which was historically part of Armenia, but at the beginning of the 20th century, when the world was being redesigned following the First World War, Nagorno-Karabakh was by a political agreement became part of Azerbaijan. Armenians continued living there. They had a special status. It was called an autonomous district with limited rights and powers. But they continued to live there until yesterday. So as of now, as a result of a large-scale war in 2020, followed by blockade by Azerbaijan, when people were deprived of all supplies, food, medicine, no mobility at all, only very limited movement of patients, critically ill people, through Red Cross convoys, and then a one-day military operation. As of now, half of the ethnic Armenians of Nagorno-Karabakh have arrived in Armenia already, and we expect the others to arrive by the end of this week. And the republic and the administration, which was governing Nagorno-Karabakh in the past 30 years, will cease to exist by the end of this year. So this is the situation. My family lived in Nagorno-Karabakh for 7 generations. At least we know of 7 generations. So my mother arrived last night. She was on the road for 3 days because of the mass exodus. The road was it was impossible to drive. So just for you to imagine, they crossed the small section of the road from Stepanakert, the city, to the border of Armenia for 2 days. It's about 100 kilometers less. So I met my mom yesterday. She was in shock. I think she's not fully realizing because of the shock, but they were prepared for this after a siege lasting for 9 months. They literally cooked the last piece of food and hit the road.
And you and your mother, your mother and her sisters, I think, your aunts,
my aunt,
have seen enough violence and
they've
enough
seen
themselves to know that it's not worth waiting around.
Yeah, they've seen 4 wars. The first one, the first war in 91, started in 91 and ended in 94. Then 2020, And in between, there were escalations in 2016 and on September 19, just 2 weeks ago.
Tell me, you once described Nagorno-Karabakh to me as almost, it smells like the seaside. It doesn't make any sense because it's a landlocked country. Why does it smell like the seaside?
It's one of my childhood memories, actually. A lush forest, imagine, a lot of evergreen trees, mild winters, humid air, and white stone. So all the local architecture is around this white sandstone. You will see it everywhere. And in Stepanakert, which was the biggest town and the capital, you had this feeling that you will cross the street, walk a block, and see the sea.
Because you could smell it.
Yes.
And it's a place of vegetables.
Oh, yes. It's a place of delicious and organic produce, because it was underdeveloped and not much attention was paid to people in Nagorno-Karabakh during the Soviet years. So modern technologies passed by. So people were using their traditional knowledge and skills to grow their food, and it was particularly delicious. I still have a handful of nuts which I keep at home. We're not eating them.
What kind of nuts?
Hazelnuts.
So what have you learnt about leading over the last few weeks?
In general,
just yourself. When you listen to the radio, when you walk the streets, when you think about yourself, when you try to have conversations with your family over the phone, what do you learn about? And also, when you try to carry on doing your normal job in the school, what do you has anything really hit you that actually leadership is really about what?
I will now start thinking aloud.
Of course.
We start thinking about leadership when we feel there is no leadership. I don't know if you agree or not, because we suddenly realize that we're in chaos. So I don't like analyzing politics. It's not rewarding because a lot is taking place behind closed doors and we never learn what happened in reality. And maybe we will never learn what happened over the past few years. But we have this feeling that it was poor leadership in some cases, because right now we were talking about humanitarian issues, which is the aspect which we see, which we witness, which we experience, so we know firsthand. But we also feel that the political goals, the political principles maybe were not set correctly, and that's why the conflict actually couldn't be resolved through peace. In Armenia, we speak about our perspective of the conflict. In Azerbaijan, they have their perspective, these two perspectives. never meet in Armenia or in Azerbaijan. But
so you learn a lot about leadership when there is an absence of it.
So when it comes to people, on these days, I think I wonder, because it's always easy to criticize, but I wonder what the people who are trying to organize life of whoever is left in Nagorno-Karabakh, what their routine looks like, and what it takes to stand and continue doing what they're doing. And it's courage, as you said. It's first of all courage to make a decision, because leadership is first of all about making decisions and standing by your decisions, and to be able to review your decisions. And sometimes it's about doing nothing, because it's also an important skill to pause, to put things on hold. When this recent escalation happened on September 19th, everybody was devastated. And in our school, we have students from Artsakh whose families were in Artsakh at the moment, in Nagorno-Karabakh. And one of them couldn't contact them for days. So we had to pull ourselves together and support these children, forgetting about our own shock, our own frustration, our own fear, because we are responsible for these children.
How do you combine that elegant thing of combining being vulnerable and talking about your fears and being vulnerable, but also being strong for people? How do you put those two together? Because everybody these days talks about, leadership is about vulnerability. It's not actually, is it? When you're really vulnerable, then it's not about vulnerability.
People are sometimes cruel. We don't like, maybe I'm being too honest, and let our listeners not criticize me on the spot. Just try to understand what I'm trying to say. But it takes courage to be emphatic. Empathy requires courage. And we like being beside strong people deep inside. Why? There can be several reasons. Because it makes us feel more confident. We feel we can rely on these people. And once we feel we're responsible for someone, we might be filled with fear. So yes, leadership is being vulnerable, but also it's the ability to think about your vulnerability, to be aware and try to act in a way as to, first of all, keep yourself intact and keep your integrity and continue leading.
Because people need you to be strong.
Yes. People want you to be strong and expect you to be strong.
Even when you don't feel it.
Yes.
You said something to me the other day before your family had arrived and before the big changes. I remember you said to me, it's all predictable now. It was
Yes.
easier when it was unpredictable. Because when it was unpredictable, there was still a tiny little bit of room for hope.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to me about what you meant then.
When you know what the outcome is going to be, and I'm not boasting now, but we were expecting this to happen, although we didn't talk about it loud because not everybody around is ready to hear that. And so, and maybe even though we realized, we still hoped, because so many actors are involved in politics, and things may change. But maybe it's also fear. We feared confessing, we feared admitting, because that's also a possibility. But then, I'll talk about my own case. So my mother was, over these 9 months, I would call her and say, "How are you?" She would say, "Oh, well, we're good. Everything is fine." And then on the day of the attack on September 19, she no longer said, "I'm good," and that's when you know that it's inevitable. The people can't stay there any longer, and it's still the initial shock. It's gonna be very hard for them. And so in this situation, we said, "Don't worry, just we're here. Everything is gonna be fine," and try to cheer them up. But of course, when you switch off the telephone, you're heartbroken, because the human tragedies, it's always heartbreaking. You can't be stiff, and politics is different.
Talk to me about how you are going to lead people who feel the humiliation of defeat. Whether it is right to feel the humiliation, this is humiliation or not, to some extent is irrelevant. People will, and I suspect you will. So how do you lead people who feel so lost and humiliated? And how do you lead them even more when you feel lost and humiliated yourself?
Julia, thank you for saying the word humiliation, because right now that's the best word to describe the situation that Armenia is going through. But we will overcome it. Why? Because you must overcome it. And in this situation, we must stop thinking about the past, at least for now, and focus on the present and start planning the future. Otherwise, will be lost forever. And it's not easy to go through this feeling, but thankfully it's temporary. And, a human being is an exceptional phenomenon. It can get over everything. It can dream. It can continue to plan and live. And the statistic says that at least 1/3 of people who are now displaced to Armenia are children, which gives us hope. They will grow up. Hopefully they will forget about what they went through. And our task now is to create a situation in which they quickly integrate, find your way, learn, grow, and become the best version of themselves and continue living.
I think you have just described leadership.
I work in a school. I work in a school. We have children from 80 countries. Many of them have seen war. Many of them are from countries which are now at war. So it's not only about Armenians, it's about all the children, because this is not what they deserve. And that's why we need to do everything to empower them. Wars will happen. You can't expect that the world will be a perfect place. But at least we need to empower these kids and not let them be broken by these situations. It's the best we can do as humans.
And to do that as a leader, you have to tell the stories of vulnerability. You have to show that you're human and you feel it as too.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, you have to give people hope, because otherwise it's hopeless.
And I want to add, we also need to teach people not to hate, because I personally learned from this conflict, which we experienced firsthand, that once you start hating, once hatred leads you, you're lost. It will not lead you anywhere. Have your goals, have your mission, and hatred shouldn't be the force leading you in whatever you do, because it's obvious. Hatred can't be a goal. It can't lead you. It can't be the dominating emotion. Right now, I think people are filled with hatred, with anger, with frustration, with denial,
With humiliation.
All because of humiliation. But it must be, well, it's okay to feel hatred, but only for some time. Hatred shouldn't be you can't be dominated by hatred. You must contain your hatred and think about your goals, not to succeed. And by the way, what we're trying to teach our students is to learn living together as people.
Arpen, I know that you nearly said no to doing this interview. What persuaded you to do it?
I wanted to say all these things after second thought, because at some point I was thinking that talking about humiliation will make me vulnerable, and I don't want to look vulnerable. But then I realized that there is so much to tell. There is so much to share. While we cannot affect geopolitical situations, we can talk to people, we can share, and then I realized that we should also be vulnerable at some point. That's also a learning process. You learn to be strong. You learn what makes you weak. What are your strong sides? Yeah, we shouldn't be afraid of being vulnerable sometimes.
Thank you, Arpen. Thank you, and we wish great love to your mother. I don't think I have anything to add. This has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you.
To become part of our movement and share your thinking with us, subscribe to the podcast and join the Women Emerging group on our website at womenemerging.org. We love all of the messages you send us. Keep them coming.